Good day. Welcome to today's devotional. I didn't get on yesterday, so sorry for that. I should say that over the next couple of months, over November and December, I'm going to be giving a devotional a little less often because I have some leftover vacation days that I'm going to try and get used up over the course of the rest of the year before the end of the year comes. So I'll be on a little less often, but I'll still be doing the devotionals, but I might be down to like twice a week or something like that. Anyway, that's all part of the plan. We'll see how it goes. Today we're in Proverbs chapter 7, verse 17, and we've been working our way through the story that's in chapter 7. And once again, I do this every video just in case this is a one-off for you. If you haven't been following along, you need to know a little bit of the context. So the context of the story is this: there's a man who is giving instruction to his son. Now, this is meant to represent God giving instruction to us, but it's in the context of there's a man giving instruction to his son, and he's teaching his son to not get involved in an affair with his neighbor's wife, saying what you need to do is, you need to avoid this scenario. Now, there's lots of other places where it talks about different angles of this idea, but in this particular story in chapter 7, he says to his son, I observed this happen. And so he tells the story of a young man who has no wisdom and how he goes off to find this woman, and then the woman comes out to meet him, and it's the whole story of the seduction. She draws him back to her place. Her husband is away, and so he goes there, and in the end, it costs him his life. And so he's telling the story to his son, or God is telling it to us, and saying, don't get tangled in this. It's a lethal scenario. It's wrong, but it's lethal. It'll kill you. In this case, in the literal sense, but at least in the spiritual sense, it'll be a destruction for you. So that's the story. So as we've been doing in this series on Proverbs, we've been just dealing with one verse at a time. So we're on verse 17 in the middle of that story. It's the woman speaking to the man, and she's trying to seduce him. Now, he's come for the purpose of being seduced, so he's totally part of this problem. But she's speaking in this case, and in verse 17, she's already making a case. She's saying, I've done the religious thing, I've been pure, I've been good, and then I've came looking for you, and I wanted you, and I've spread these blankets on my bed. And then she goes in verse 17, she says, I have sprinkled my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. And then she goes on to say, come, let's go have this affair together. But in verse 17, once again, I'll read it. It says, I have sprinkled my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. And so you think, what on earth is that about? Well, she's painting a picture for him, right? She's trying, in her attempt to seduce him, she's painting this picture of how much fun it's going to be. And so she's trying to tempt him. And so the myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon, these aromas that would be on the bed to create a sensual environment so that they could have, this exotic evening together. That's the idea. And it's interesting. It raises the question of, why is it that so often our temptations in life, whether this is a seduction for a sexual affair, but even other things, how often in our life our temptations center around the sensual, some sort of a draw to our senses, right? Whether it be to the eye, things like lust, or to the taste or the smell, things like gluttony or whatever. But even things like violence have images attached to them, and there's a sensualness to them of sorts. It's weird, but as humans, very often our temptations include some kind of sensualness. And I think the reason for that is because we're naturally made as sensory beings. We sense things. We have these 5 basic senses of touch, taste, and smell, and sight and hearing. And so we have all these ways that we interact with the world that inform us about what's happening in the world. And we've just been kind of designed to use those to help us move forward and to decide what to do in the world. It's so physical beings. But the spiritual temptations that we have to do or be certain ways very, very often draw on those things in some way or another. It's very, very common. And I guess it's important for us to know that it's not wrong to have the draw through our senses. I mean, that's the way we're designed. That's how we interact with the world, right? We have a draw to the good smell of food that actually helps us. It's a good thing. We know that's something I should eat and that's something I shouldn't eat. It smells terrible, right? And so that those things help us, navigate and determine what we should do, and in just as basic things as what I should or shouldn't eat. And so God made us that way, and that's not wrong. Those things are understandable and good. But what happens when temptation occurs is that there's a draw brought on those avenues into our mind. There's a draw put on those to try and entice us forward into something wrong. So it's kind of a lie in a sense, but it draws us forward. Very similar to our emotions, by the way. Our senses and our emotions are highly connected. So we in the same way that our emotions will often draw us into certain ways of thinking or into certain places because of how we feel, and we think if we do this thing, it'll make us feel better, and so we'll pursue happy feelings. In a similar way, we want to pursue pleasant tastes and pleasant aromas and pleasant sensations, and so they're very connected, and they have a very strong hold on our lives as being physical beings. But we're also spiritual beings, and we have a soul, and we have a mind, and so the way God designed it, and made it, is that we are supposed to, as we grow up and become mature, that our mind will take over and will learn to use our senses and our emotions and control our senses and emotions in such a way that they are genuinely good tools for our life, instead of being a source for lots of bad things in our life. And so that's what it is. That's why a child will put everything in their mouth, and an adult will teach the child, don't put that in your mouth. Right? Don't put everything in your mouth. And as the child grows up, the child learns, oh, some things shouldn't go in my mouth. And and that's the progression. Well, that same idea applies to so much of our life, in that as we grow up, as we grow better in our spiritual state, we need to be able to more and more hold control over our emotions so that they don't dominate us. And we have to be the same way with our senses, so that our the gratification of our senses doesn't become the driving force. And our senses instead are great tools for helping us live in the world rather than taskmasters ruling us. And this is the danger. If we don't grow in that, then our emotions or our senses can become taskmasters that drive us forward. We're always trying to satisfy not just a hunger, but the desire for taste, and not just a sense of need somewhere, but actually just a sense of desire to see. I mean, we can think about the visual sense in our day and age, and these social media programs that I can't even remember what they're called, but the ones that just show you a video every 5 seconds. It's like, what's being fed there? Well, there's a sensory input that's being fed there, and it's not good for us. It's things like that. And so it's an important thing to remember that proper control of emotions, proper control of senses is a good thing, and then they themselves are good things. But if we don't have proper control of them, then they become avenues to lead us into very bad things, like this story. This young man is drawn into the thoughts of the exotic and the sensual evening he will have with this woman, and that is dominating him. And so he goes with her, and later, which we'll do another verse, he's led like a bull by her nose ring. It's like he's just drawn into this, right? It's like taking him along, because he hasn't mastered and hasn't learned to control these very natural parts of our being, but he's letting them rule him. And so he's a prisoner to them. Self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. The New Testament warns us about sensuality. It explicitly warns us against sensuality. And as sort of a contrary to that would be the idea, the virtue of self-control that God gives us and teaches us, where we say, I'm going to learn to control my desires, control my wants, control my sensory drives, and I'm going to be the master, and my body will be my slave, rather than the other way around, my body being my master and my soul and mind being the slave of my body. And that's the virtue we want to seek, and it will keep us out of so much trouble. And the good news is we really can grow in these things. Like we God made us to have those things, but he also made us to be able to grow and learn. If you struggle with that as an adult, and you may be, I'm 50 some years old, I still struggle with this sometimes. And so you gotta realize that's part of life, but you can learn to master your emotions and your senses. And so don't ever give up or fall for Satan's trick that says, "Oh, you can't help it. It's who you are. It's the way you were made." Well, yeah, I was made very different than I am now because I was a baby, but I'm not anymore. I've grown, and so grow in all areas, and you can grow in this area as well, and you can be a very powerful person by learning self control. The person who learns to master themselves, boys, that's a powerful person, and that can be you. But self control isn't automatic. It isn't accidental. It's a deliberate thing. It's self control. It's not well, it turned out this way or it turned out that way. No, it's self control. And you can learn it, but you got to be deliberate about it. On the other hand, if you don't, then what will naturally rule you is self-indulgence, and you will indulge your emotions and you will indulge your senses, and they will master you. And that's a sad place to get to. Anyway, that's it for today. God bless you in this. The Lord willing, I think on Tuesday of next week, I will be back on for verse 18 over the weekend. Don't forget the Lord's Day. Give God his day and just honor him with it. And encourage you to do so. We're for various reasons, we're not going to have a teaching video this week, but we'll be right back on schedule next week. At any rate, God bless you and have a great weekend.